In June 2025, Pixar walked into theaters with Elio and accidentally made history for all the wrong reasons. It delivered Pixar's lowest opening weekend ever, opening around $21 million domestically. Half-empty auditoriums, confused parents, a movie that a shocking number of people didn't even realize had released until it was already losing. And at the exact same time, a completely different animated movie, Sony's K-pop Demon Hunters, was doing the opposite. It didn't limp. It detonated on Netflix, racking up hundreds of millions of views in its first weeks, and then pulled off the move Pixar used to own. It turned one release into a culture engine. The soundtrack didn't just do well for a movie. Songs from the film climbed major charts. The fictional group started getting treated like real idol acts, and TikTok did what theaters used to do: make it unavoidable. Netflix later said the film hit 325.1 million views in its first 5 weeks. And that scale matters because it turns a movie into a shared language. People didn't just watch it, they performed it. You had dance challenges to the hooks, fan cams built from animated characters like they were real idols, reaction channels dissecting the lore, and edit accounts turning single facial expressions into looping memes. Even if you never finished the movie, you still knew it, because the internet served it to you in pieces. In 2026 terms, that's what an animated hit looks like. The movie is just the spark, and the internet is the gasoline. That contrast is the whole story. Not Pixar is dead, not Sony is lucky. The story is that the studio that used to own the future is now getting outplayed by studios that understand the present. Pixar didn't suddenly forget how to animate. Pixar forgot how to be brave in public. Because Pixar's decline is not about craft. Pixar still has incredible animators. The lighting, the rendering, the character work, none of that suddenly got worse. The decline is about how Pixar makes decisions, where it launches its originals, and how it thinks culture spreads in 2026. If you want to understand how the most respected animation studio on Earth ended up here, getting body slammed by a movie that sounds like a Discord meme, you have to rewind to when Pixar felt untouchable. Pixar's golden age wasn't built on safe ideas. It was built on ideas that sounded insane if you explained them in one sentence. A nearly silent romance between two trash robots drifting through space. A rat becoming a fine dining chef in Paris. An old man flying his house to South America with balloons. A movie set inside the mind of a girl where emotions are characters. On paper, those are awful pitches. In a normal corporate studio, they die in committee. At Pixar, those pitches were the point. Pixar's culture protected directors and protected specificity. The studio believed something most Hollywood executives don't. Audiences will follow you into weird places if the emotional core feels honest, not relatable, honest. And for about 15 years, Pixar proved that theory so hard it became a law of entertainment. Pixar wasn't just making animated movies. It was shaping childhoods, collecting Oscars, and setting a bar so high that everyone else looked like they were playing a different sport. But here's what most people miss. Pixar's old magic wasn't just taste. It was an operating system. Pixar had the Braintrust, those brutal story meetings where filmmakers got shredded, not to make a movie safer, but to make it sharper. They had a culture of plussing, where the default response wasn't no. It was yes, and make it better. They were willing to hold on to a weird first act if it served the emotional landing. They were willing to let a movie be quiet, or odd, or uncomfortable, because the studio trusted the audience more than it feared a bad comment section. That's the part that decays first in great companies. Not talent, not budgets, courage. And Pixar's courage started getting tested by a new reality. Pixar stopped being a small, rebellious shop and became a crown jewel inside a massive corporation that runs on brand safety. In a small studio, risk is creative. In a giant corporation, risk becomes reputational, global, and expensive. A risky Pixar movie isn't just a risky Pixar movie anymore. It touches Disney's relationships, Disney's international distribution plans, Disney's licensing and merchandise, and even the theme park machine that depends on the brand feeling clean. So the incentives quietly shift. The safest move is to make every story feel broadly pleasant, broadly universal, and broadly non-controversial. That doesn't sound evil, it sounds responsible. But it has a hidden cost. It trains the studio to pre-edit itself. And once you start pre-editing, you don't kill the movie. You kill the sharpness, the weirdness, the specificity. Everything that makes a Pixar film feel like it had a point of view. Then the industry changed. Streaming changed habits. TikTok changed how culture spreads. Franchises swallowed theaters. And Pixar, instead of adapting like a predator, started adapting like a museum, protecting the brand, protecting the legacy, protecting the vibe, until the vibe became the cage. From 2020 onward, Pixar released originals that were often beautiful, often thoughtful, and sometimes genuinely great. But they didn't stick in the culture the way Pixar used to. The audience reaction became weirdly consistent. That was nice, and then nothing. No obsession. No quoting it for years. No characters turning into icons. No sense that you had to see it. And in the modern attention economy, nice is a slow death sentence. Because now you're not competing with other animated movies. You're competing with entire ecosystems, Fortnite events, anime fandoms, K-pop stan culture, TikTok edits, YouTube essay channels, streamers, memes, reaction clips, and the reality that most people don't go see a movie anymore the way they used to. They consume culture in fragments. Modern hits aren't just movies. They are machines that generate fragments. A song people replay, a scene people clip, a character people cosplay, a quote that becomes a meme template, a 5-second loop that lives on phones for weeks. If your movie doesn't produce those cultural seeds, it fades fast, even if it's good. Which brings us back to Elio, because Elio wasn't just a flop. Elio was Pixar's self-portrait. On the surface, Elio looks like classic Pixar comfort food. A lonely kid, a cosmic adventure, a you matter arc. Big emotional beats. If you only saw the finished movie, you might say, yeah, that was cute. And that's exactly the problem. Cute is not the legacy of Pixar. Elio matters because it shows what Pixar has started optimizing for, avoiding risk instead of creating obsession. By the time Elio arrived, it carried the stink of modern studio fear. It had the kind of quiet marketing rollout that screams, please don't judge us too hard. It landed in a marketplace where family audiences, with tighter budgets, behave like investors. They don't bet on vague. They bet on known winners. And Pixar released a low-buzz original into a world where parents had already been trained to wait. And that training wasn't an accident. During the pandemic era, Disney sent multiple Pixar movies straight to Disney Plus at no extra cost. In the short term, it helped subscriptions and gave families a gift. In the long term, it rewired consumer behavior. It quietly told households, Pixar originals are home content now. So when Pixar tried to push originals back into theaters, audiences didn't react with loyalty. They reacted with logic. We'll watch it later. This is the part Disney and Pixar keep pretending isn't real. Families are not being disloyal. They are being rational. If you have one weekend, 2 kids, and a budget, you buy the sure thing. You don't gamble on a trailer that looks like maybe cute. You gamble on the brand you already trust, especially when you're pretty sure that the maybe cute movie will be on Disney Plus soon anyway. That's why Elio's box office hurt in a very specific way. It wasn't just people didn't like it. Plenty of people who saw it thought it was decent. The problem was that the movie never achieved must-see energy. It didn't feel like an event. And without event energy, theatrical is brutal. Now, if you're a Pixar defender, you'll say the obvious thing. Pixar is fine. Pixar had a monster win. Yes, and that win actually proves the problem. Inside Out 2 became a global phenomenon, smashing past the billion-dollar mark and overtaking Frozen 2 to become the highest-grossing animated film of all time globally. That's not Pixar is back. That's sequels still print money. Inside Out 2 was a known product. It was a safe bet for parents. It was cultural memory. It was the kind of theatrical event people still show up for in the streaming era because everyone already knows the taste. And Pixar, staring at that scoreboard in 2026, faces the temptation that has corrupted every creative empire eventually. Stop taking original risks and turn into a sequel factory that cashes in on yesterday forever. You can see the future lineup tilting right there in black and white. Pixar's next big theatrical anchors include Hoppers in March 2026 and Toy Story 5 in June 2026. One is an original gamble. One is the definition of safe. One has to earn trust from scratch. The other can print money on brand recognition alone. So Pixar is standing at the crossroads. Do you protect the machine, or do you protect the magic? Because here's the nightmare scenario for Pixar. You can be financially alive and culturally dying at the same time. A company can be profitable and still lose its aura. Pixar's aura, the thing that made every Pixar release feel like an event, is what's currently in danger. And that aura isn't just vibes. It is a competitive advantage. When audiences believe you are the studio that makes the next classic, they show up on faith. When that faith gets replaced by, "we'll stream it later," your originals become background noise. So how did Pixar's faith decay? Not with one bad movie, but with a chain of small, rational decisions that trained the world to treat Pixar like content instead of cinema. First, the Disney Plus era turned originals into drops. When Soul or Luca shows up at home with no extra ticket cost, the message to families is simple. Pixar is part of the subscription you already pay for. That's great for a platform. It's poison for event identity. Once you normalize Pixar premieres at home, you don't get to act shocked when people don't rush to theaters for the next original. Second, the marketing changed tone. Old Pixar marketing sold you on a concept so clean you could repeat it at dinner. Toys that come alive, monsters that scare kids, emotions inside your head. You didn't need a paragraph to explain it. The hook carried itself. Newer originals often lead with mood. Beautiful, gentle, heartfelt, important. That's not a hook. That's a promise of homework. Third, the internal fear factor rose. Pixar's earlier era had leaders who defended strange choices upward. They argued with exec logic. They protected directors. They could say, yes, the first act is quiet. Yes, the idea is weird. Trust the landing. When that protection weakens, you get movies that technically work but feel like they survived meetings. And in 2026, survival is not enough. Culture rewards boldness. Now flip the camera to Sony, because Sony's animation playbook is basically early Pixar with a modern brain. Sony Pictures animation used to be inconsistent. Sometimes good, sometimes embarrassing. But over the last several years, Sony has been operating like a studio that understands how culture spreads right now. Spider-Verse didn't just succeed, it rewired what mainstream audiences accept as good animation. It made style the selling point. It made the visuals the hook. It made the movie feel like it was designed for screenshots, edits, fan art, and internet obsession. It didn't hide its weirdness. It used the weirdness as marketing. Then you get The Mitchells versus the Machines, a hyper-online, maximalist, meme-aware film that didn't try to be universally bland. It tried to be extremely itself. It was loud, specific, and built for the timeline. And it connected because it understood something Pixar used to understand. Specificity is what feels universal now. And then you get K-pop Demon Hunters, which sounds like a parody pitch but was executed like a serious cultural product. The genius wasn't just K-pop plus demons. The genius was treating fandom as a distribution channel. Sony didn't build that movie like a film you watch once. They built it like an object you join. The characters have looks that can be cosplayed. The songs are structured like real Idol releases. The aesthetic is instantly identifiable in a scroll. The story is designed to create moments, not just a plot. And that's why Netflix was the perfect launch. Netflix is basically a slot machine for attention. If something hits, it gets multiplied. If it doesn't, it vanishes. The platform rewards the exact kind of weird, specific, internet-native thing that Theatrical punishes. Theatrical is friction. Netflix is momentum. In theaters, a family has to commit money, time, parking, snacks, and the risk that the kids hate it. On Netflix, the commitment is one click. That low friction changes what kinds of ideas can win. It's not that Netflix makes movies better. It's that Netflix can let risk breathe long enough for fandom to ignite. Pixar, meanwhile, keeps trying to force boldish originals into a theatrical economy that punishes anything without instant trust, and then acts surprised when families behave rationally. Here's the real difference between the two studios. Sony makes movies designed to be spread. Pixar makes movies designed to be watched. That sounds noble, but it's a problem in a fragment economy. A spreadable movie doesn't mean shallow. It means strategic. It means you intentionally build cultural handles. A song that charts, a scene that clips, a character dynamic that creates edits, an art style that screams thumbnail, a twist people argue about, a quote that becomes a caption. Pixar used to do this accidentally because their stories were iconic. Now other studios do it on purpose. And that brings us to Pixar's real enemy in 2026. Not critics, not budgets, not even competition. Pixar's enemy is irrelevance. Discomfort doesn't kill movies anymore. A little edge doesn't kill movies. The internet can handle weird. The internet loves weird. What kills a movie is being so safe, so smooth, so broadly nice that nobody has a reason to talk about it tomorrow. When a studio becomes more afraid of being disliked than of being forgotten, it starts building movies that are hard to hate and easy to ignore. So the question in 2026 isn't, can Pixar recover? Pixar can recover anytime it wants. Pixar still has world-class talent. Pixar still has the brand. Pixar still has distribution. Pixar still has Disney's machine behind it. The real question is, will the people in charge allow Pixar to be dangerous again?